Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of the DevOps Diaries podcast with me, your host Jack McCurdy. And today I am joined by Amy Oplinger-Singh. Amy, hi.
Hi Jack, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
I'm doing great, and you are very welcome. It is my absolute pleasure to have you on and talk about some pretty cool, interesting stuff, important conversations when we talked about the outline for this episode. So I'm very excited and very grateful that you've agreed to spend an hour or so with me and the listeners of the podcast. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me, and I'll try to make it interesting.
I have no doubt that will happen. Amy, give us a little bit of your Salesforce story. Where are you now? Where did you start?
So currently, I serve as the head of growth and partnerships for an ISV, dataimporter.io. I say the name like that because it often gets confused with other products that are similarly named. So dataimporter.io. And it's a startup based out of New Zealand. And it's really just me and Sam, who is the founder and creator of the product. And we're trying to raise awareness in North America of our product. And I think it's going great so far. Before that, I've been in the ecosystem for exactly 10 years this month, as a matter of fact.
Congratulations on 10 years.
It went by fast, for sure. I can't believe it's been that long. And it was kind of a whimsical decision that I made to jump into the ecosystem, not having any kind of knowledge of the greater Ohana and things of that nature. I immediately jumped into consulting. And over the years, I've worked for a variety of partners as a consultant on the functional side. And then 2020 came, and I got a little bit of burnout from, I really just didn't want to build another process builder to save my life, and started really kind of a process of introspection and figuring out what in my day made me happy and what in my day I hated. And I'm a notebook person, so I kept 2 different notebooks and journaled all that and kind of switched my path, which is one of the many fantastic things about this industry is you can pivot if you want to. So that's sort of my background. I guess I left out a lot along the way. I've spoken at a lot of community events. I was MVP for a short bit and got to speak at Dreamforce. Inadvertently met my husband because of Salesforce. So all of those things. It's a very positive experience for me the last 10 years.
Amazing. You fell into Salesforce like many of us did, myself included. Early wins. What was Salesforce like for you 10 years ago when you entered the ecosystem, and why did you decide to go into consulting straight off the bat?
Yeah, so great question. And I was an end user. I was in sales, and I was one of the few salespeople who actually did like putting my information into Salesforce because it kept me organized and helped me stay on top of my deals. So
I bet your VP loved you too.
yes, and everybody wanted my secret. Like, why are you all of a sudden at the top of the leaderboard? And I was like, well, I type the things into this thing, and then it reminds me when I have to call. And so it was no real secret other than using the system and getting away from, like, I don't know, ACT or Goldmine back then. I'm really dating myself, or even just writing it down in a notebook. So I really loved using Salesforce, and I worked for a company that implemented Salesforce. I found that I really loved it. They had me help out the consultant that was implementing it because I was the only salesperson on the team who had previously used Salesforce. So I acted kind of like as a liaison between the business and the consultant and got to see a lot of the back end of Salesforce. And I thought, oh, I can do this. How do I learn how to do this? And back then it was a force.com workbook. And so every day after work, back then when you had to drive into the office, I would get out my notebook, which I still have on my shelf today, which is bound and everything. And I would go through and do the little exercises and teach myself Salesforce. And I wanted to figure out how I, as a non-technical person with no tech background, could do this for a living. Was it even feasible? I'm in Ohio. I had no idea of, like I said, of the greater ecosystem at all. And I really didn't have any ties locally to any tech people. So at the job that implemented Salesforce, I asked if I could be the admin because I had learned in my studying that that was the position. And they said, no, no, silly girl, you're going back to sales. This is going over to IT. Um, and I was heartbroken, but it wouldn't leave me alone. It was in my brain and I just wouldn't let it go. So I figured, why not? I need to try to make something happen if I could. I reconfigured my resume to highlight my Salesforce experience, put it out into the internet, and lo and behold, a recruiter contacted me, and I was on a project within 2 weeks. Literally, it was that fast. Um, and my first project was at GE Lighting in Cleveland. And there I was tasked with revamping their Salesforce training because they had very poor adoption at the time. And that's what I did. It was a 30-day project. I got it turned into about a 7-month project because I made friends there and got into different departments and started talking to people. And I really consider that my Salesforce boot camp. I learned a lot there. It was also the genesis of my imposter syndrome, which would, of course, later become a Dreamforce session and probably the most delivered session that I've given over the last 10 years, still relevant even 10 years later. So that's how I jumped in. I really didn't function as an admin, would never ever cut it as a developer. But that was my foray into the ecosystem. And once I jumped in, um, there was no going back. It was just, I've said it before a lot of times, it kind of scratched an itch in my brain that I didn't know was there.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And thanks
That's a
for bringing
long
up the.
story.
Yeah, no, no, it's a great story, and thank you for bringing up the imposter syndrome, which I definitely want to get to in just a second. But in that story, you mentioned switching up your resume and focusing on the skills, and I think that's what a lot of people need to do these days, regardless of whether it's Salesforce or anything anywhere else. We could talk about AI or whatever, but the switching job roles, tweaking resumes, tweaking, we call them CVs here in the UK. What's your advice to people having done that back 10 years ago, tweaking a resume to focus on Salesforce, and then 2 weeks later getting a Salesforce job? What's your boilerplate, or would be your boilerplate standard advice to anybody that is on that journey and is tweaking a resume to go and get a new role? Because I think that's super relevant, and the fact that you did it and were successful doing it, you probably got something great to share there.
Well, I'm going to level set that with it was a lot easier 10 years ago than it is today. It was a lot easier. I had a lot of factors in my favor back then. Number one being that it was easier, the market wasn't flooded like it is now. Um, and I'm in Ohio. There, even speaking to that recruiter back then, my skill set was so varied, they very rarely got a resume with my skill set. So that was why it was easy for me. People that I talk to now, I still mentor a great deal. And every conference that I've been to in the last 2 years, the main talking point is how do I get my foot in the door? How do I start this career? I love everything that I'm doing. I'm doing all the trailheads. I have a dev org, but I can't get experience because no one's hiring me. And the podcast that we did recently on the job market kind of highlighted that as well. It's just a lot harder for people to stand out these days because you're competing with, for example, me. I got laid off twice last year, so you have to compete with me, who has 10 years of experience, all this product knowledge, all these certifications. And what are you going to do as somebody new into the ecosystem? And what I found is the one thing that stayed true over the last 10 years is your network, the connections that you build, the people that you meet, and kind of the tips and tricks that you can get from everybody. It's invaluable. When I was starting, Twitter was big back then. It was fantastic for connecting with different people in the ecosystem. Those people were foundational in my journey. And now I think it's more difficult even to do that because the social media is kind of splintered off a little bit. So for people coming in and looking to get their experience, AI is going to help you certainly tailor your resumes to the particular job that you might be applying for. However, that connection, that person that you meet at a conference or a user group or connect with virtually on any of the platforms is probably going to get you a little bit farther than resume tweaks like I was lucky enough to get by with.
Yeah, always that classic phrase comes to mind with stuff like this: your network is your net worth.
Yep.
And it is true now more than ever that we got to lean on people and human connections to get our foot in the door, and go to your user group, go to your Salesforce Saturday, go to your local Salesforce community conference, and build those connections, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Um, Imposter syndrome. Let's go there. You got your
Okay.
first taste of imposter syndrome 7 months. You said 7 months into this first consulting job that you had that was supposed to be 30 days. How? What did imposter syndrome look like to you? Can you define that for others who might be wondering, imposter syndrome? How do I know if I've got it, or what is it?
Sure. I didn't know that I had it when I was at GE. It wasn't until some looking back at my behaviors that I realized it. I didn't know what it was when I was at GE. I just knew how I felt there. I was at a corporation where I was in meetings with people that went to Harvard, and I just couldn't wrap my mind around that they were asking for my opinion. Or I was working with people with MBAs who were relying on my expertise. So I felt a lot like a fraud. And that's basically the crux of imposter syndrome is feeling like a fraud despite evidence to the contrary. And I wasn't familiar with imposter syndrome at all. I've always been an anxious person. I suffered from anxiety my whole life. So I just brushed my feelings at GE off to I'm in a new industry. There was a lot going on in my life. I was going through a divorce at the time. So it was all kinds of things. So I couldn't narrow it down to this job in particular until I had a look back at my experience. But um, that was the genesis of me looking into imposter syndrome, and it coincided with my activity ramping up in the ecosystem. And I attended a global women in tech call, and they started talking about imposter syndrome, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like checking all the boxes. This is exactly how I feel. This is wonderful. So that got me down that research rabbit hole of what is this. And I just really kind of bought a lot of books on it and started reading everything I could about it. um, and that's how I kind of named the feelings that I had around my early career. And I'll be honest, still to my career, every time I make a pivot, I feel this way.
Yes. So all evidence to the contrary being these people that have got MBAs or went to Harvard were asking for your expertise.
Yeah.
That's that's a that's a strong indicator that you're doing a good job and you're there and you're valued, right? And then to go on to something that you mentioned earlier, you've been speaking at Salesforce community conferences, like you were a Salesforce MVP. All of these things, like what does imposter syndrome change or manifest itself in different ways the way you show up at work, or like how did you manage that? I guess with does the success lose its shine when you feel like that, or are there other factors?
So a couple things happened. After my experience at GE and after that Women in Tech call, once I could name what I was feeling and I could separate it from just my normal anxious self, um, the call for speakers at Midwest Dreamin' was tweeted out by Eric Dreshfield. And I thought, oh, should I apply to speak? Am I too young? Am I too new to the ecosystem to speak? And even if I did apply to speak, what would I talk about? And I couldn't get the imposter syndrome out of my head. So I wrote an abstract and submitted it. I didn't tell a person, I didn't tweet about it, I didn't say anything because I was convinced that I wasn't going to get selected because this is a technical conference. Nobody's going to want to hear about this sort of thing. But to my luck, again, I had a very lucky path for my first year in the ecosystem. I was accepted, and that was really the genesis of the whole um, kind of changing how I felt about imposter syndrome, because in the session, what I did was I noticed that mostly women were talking about it in the ecosystem, and I wanted to get everyone's perspective. So I looped in some people that I looked up to on Twitter who I thought, oh my gosh, these are MVPs. They couldn't possibly relate to this. I just sent them a little DM, even though I didn't know them. And lo and behold, all of them responded back saying, oh my God, yes, I feel this every day, you know. And it was so validating for me to have that in my session, number one, to know that I wasn't alone in feeling this way. And that people that I looked at on social media were going through exactly the same thing that I was. It was just a feeling of being new to tech, totally changing industries, the excitement of everything going on in the ecosystem when you're new to it. And then I was constantly feeling like I was just like treading water to keep my head above the waves. You know what I mean? It was just so
Yeah.
much information, so much for me to learn, and that fueled the imposter syndrome. But after that first session at Midwest Dreamin', it was just a canon event in my career. And it really helped me a lot in managing my feelings. I can kind of look back on things. I still keep one of the tips that I give people is to keep a kudos file. So I still keep all kinds of positive comments or messages and things. And I look through that from time to time to manage if I start to feel a little bit overwhelmed by negative thoughts and getting in that cycle. So,
Yeah, what you're saying definitely resonates with me, and I think probably resonates for a lot of people. I found it interesting just then when you mentioned you reached out to these other MVP peers like on Twitter, and they still responded to you. But that initial thought, these people are MVPs, like there's no way that they're feeling this way, but they are. And something that springs to mind when I think about imposter syndrome or anybody in their career journey, the role that they're trying to do, is a phrase, and I can't remember where the first place I heard it was, but it's very simple, and it's like comparison is the thief of joy.
mhm.
If you're constantly comparing yourself to where other people are or what other people are doing and thinking, could I do that? Should I do that? Rather than focusing on where you are, what you do bring to the table, and everything else, then you're going to self perpetuate those feelings of inadequacy or limited self worth, or whatever it is. I think that's the important thing for anybody in this ecosystem or in their life. All the things everybody has a lot of great things in their life, and a lot of the time maybe it's human nature to look at what we don't have, your luxury sports car, or Rolex, or whatever it is that other people have. But
It's a lot.
maybe
It's easy to fill in the blanks. You know, you see a tweet and you think, oh, this is so great. She got MVP. She's just living the life. Her career is so great. And secretly, you know, every night that person is stressing out and doing multiple trailheads because they can't figure something out or it doesn't make any sense and they don't want to appear like they don't know what they're doing, or, you know, you get MVP and it's not everything that you thought from the outside that it might be. So it's just very easy for people to fill in those blanks of the highlight reels that you're posting on social media. So I had to learn back then to separate that. And people only want to put what's good out there. It's changed a lot. People are a little bit more authentic, I think, sometimes. Some people these days, but back then it was a lot of hooray and rah rah. And then you talk to them in person, they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, So it's easy to let
Do you
people
think?
fill in the blanks.
Yeah. Do you think there? What's your opinion on the increased pressure being visible, like as an MVP or somebody that speaks at conferences a lot?
Yep. It definitely led to my burnout. And it was 2019 for me. Uh, I was just really feeling like it was at a Dreamforce in 2019, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? And I thought a long while about it, like what am I feeling? What is going on? And it was just this constant, I was everywhere all the time. I said yes to everybody and everything. And it was to my detriment. Um, I did have a lot of positive things as a result, but it was also to my detriment. I learned that maybe I'm not an extrovert like I thought I was. Maybe I'm a little bit more introverted than I thought I was. And coming to that realization, I said, I'm going to take a year off. I'm not going to do any events. I sent an email to Salesforce saying, respectfully, please do not include me in the renomination for MVP. This is just not aligning with me anymore, and I don't feel I can put the effort into it that's required. And I decided that 2020 was going to be my year off. Now, coincidentally, something
2020
else
was everyone's
happened.
year off.
I had kind of something backing me up anyway. So it was, and I was getting married in 2020. So we got married like 2 weeks before the world shut down. So coincidentally, the pandemic came along, and I said, wow, universe, thanks for, living up to the fact that I'm not going to have to say yes to anything this year. So it was the positive, one of the few positive things that I can say about 2020 was, besides I got married, was I was able to take a step back. I was able to do that without much fanfare because everybody was taking a step back. Nobody was going anywhere. So it was not like a noticeable thing like, oh, where's Amy? What's she doing? Not that everybody's concerned about that, but that's how I perceived it would be seen. Like, where's Amy? So it was easy for me to step back and really kind of refocus. And that was the year that I switched out of consulting as well. So it was beneficial, very beneficial for me to take that time to myself to just be honest with what I was feeling and realize that you can change and you can do what's right for you and still have a fantastic career, still have great opportunities come your way.
Yeah, when you reflect on that experience from 2020, what do you think the most valuable lesson it is that it's taught you? And if anybody is in a similar position to how you were feeling back then, now, what's your advice to them to taking the plunge to pull back or switch or take whatever action they think it is that they need to take to realign? You use the word alignment to realign
Yeah,
themselves with what's important to them.
your career is not going to go away. That's what I think my biggest fear was, that, because I thought I equated saying yes to everything and constantly being out there was the reason for my career. And I realized that it wasn't. It was me. I was still there. I still had my network that I built, and I didn't have to say yes to everything because it was tearing me down. It was cutting off the thing that made my career what it was, right? So I think for anybody thinking that they have to constantly be in the spotlight to the detriment of their own self, you don't. You don't have to say yes to everything. You don't have to be all things to all people. You don't have to answer every single DM on LinkedIn that people send you from all over the world. Those were things that I put on myself as I was trying to figure out my way in the ecosystem. So if one thing, if besides the kind of building your network, that's a topic that comes up often in mentorship is how do I become MVP? How do I get a golden hoodie? People want these things and they think that it's going to make all the difference, and it might, and it might not. So you don't know. You have to really get into what helped me. It was just getting into alignment with myself and what was important for me and making it work for me. And it still does that.
Speaking of it doing that, so you're now at Data Importer with Sam,
Yeah.
and tell me a little bit about the journey of ending up with an ISV from the consulting world.
Yes. So what year is it? 2025. So 2024 was rough for me. I got laid off twice. Um,
Mm.
January of 24, I was laid off from Rafter One, which it was a job that I loved. I really liked working there, but they got purchased and we all knew what was happening. Excuse me. And then I got picked up by uh, a consulting partner out of India, and you know that was rough because they were trying to break into the North American market. And I had some pretty outspoken thoughts about that, and they were on board with it. But, it was just what it was. It wasn't a match for breaking into the North American market. Sam reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I had never heard of Data Importer, to be honest. I always use the other one. And
Had you heard of Sam? Did
no,
you know Sam before? No,
we
just
were connected on LinkedIn, but, I'm connected to a lot of people that I don't really ever talk to. So I didn't know Sam. I didn't know Data Importer at all. And so we just had a bunch of conversations, and he and I really like Sam. And that I think that's important to say because there's a lot of people I've worked for that I just took the job and I didn't really care for them as a human being. But Sam is a good human being. So I thought that we aligned well. He knows that I'm super anxious and he's super laid back. So it kind of works out well for our dynamic. It's just the two of us. And so he's super flexible, and he's open to like whatever ideas I have. So before I joined, I looked at the product. I thought, oh, well, this is super easy because I'm not a technical person and I could figure it out. I wish I would have had this on projects where I was doing data work. Um, and so that made me feel good about it, about joining. And he had one idea for the position in mind, and I pitched him a different way, a different position, and a different job description. I literally wrote out my own job description, and he was like, let's do it. I talked to my advisors, let's do it. You're like three positions in one. Let's go. And so we literally just had a meeting yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I was convinced I was being fired. My anxiety and
your
imposter
imposter
syndrome
syndrome
lives.
just it's still there. It's not gone.
It totally does. It because this is a pivot and this is a startup, and it's new for me. It's exciting, but it's also just the two of us. So there's no systems in place. So we're building them as we go and being scrappy. And he had a laugh when I told him that was the first thing out of my mouth. Am I being fired? And he was like, no, I'll make that more clear next time. You know what I mean? That's just, he laughs at my anxiety, and I'm happy to provide the comic relief, but um, it's going well. We're 9 months in, and I feel like it's in alignment with me as a person. And so that's just how I want the remaining years of my career to go is being useful, having boundaries, having that clarity, having simplicity in my life, and you know, being in a role that's aligned with my values is a great place to be in my career, honestly, to be able to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're happy. which is a
I
good thing, and
am.
that makes me happy first and foremost. And I think if you are aligned with a product and its values, like much like I've worked at GearSet for 6 years, and GearSet has gone through many changes and periods of growth, and the pains that come with going from a 30-person company to a 360-person company, 370 or whatever it is now. But I think I'm very grateful to work for a company that I think are aligned with my values. Like, and our core value is helping teams be more successful with their Salesforce delivery, and like that's
Hmm.
a value that's close to me, and therefore I'm happy to continue hitching my trailer to this wagon for the foreseeable, because it's aligned with my values. What's how do you, I think one of the questions that people might be asking is like, how do I find an organization that is aligned with my values, especially in the challenging job market that we have right now, and options might be limited? Because happy, healthy teams and persons that work in those teams are going to create a better business and better outcomes for everybody involved, but those opportunities might not necessarily be there.
It's not going to be easy. And again, like I feel like whenever I talk to somebody about my story, and this is part of the imposter syndrome too, is a lot of luck has played into my career, in my opinion. Um, he reached out to me, you know what I mean? I didn't go looking for. Um, so that was difficult, but the previous one had reached out to me too, and that didn't turn out so great. So I feel like, again, those people were part of the network that I had built. So my advice for somebody looking for something that's in alignment with them is, if you can, talk to somebody that's worked there, either present or past, because how a company presents on paper often isn't the reality of the workers that are there. And my experience at different partners has played that out, you know. It often depends on what team you're on or what manager you have and things of that nature. So getting kind of insider scoop from people that have worked there, as you're building your network, you'll be able to see where people have worked before. They'll be able to tell you the real deal. And take that with a grain of salt as well. Some people are just cranky and hate every place they work. So, you know what I mean? No place that they've worked is ever good enough. So, common thing might be that person. But anyway, you'll learn to suss that out. It's very difficult to figure that out prior to joining, to be honest. It's a gut feeling that I had during interviews, which also sounds super wishy-washy, but that's who I am. I take a lot on like my um, kind of instinct, and do I feel like I vibe with this person? If they're rude to me during an interview, if they haven't even bothered to look at my LinkedIn profile and ask me something that's a glaring example of them not doing any research, then I end it. And I'm lucky that I'm in that position, but I think a lot of time will be saved for you if you're looking for alignment in trusting that gut feeling that you have, because we all have it. But a lot of people, particularly the women that I speak to, ignore that in the beginning. And you'll talk to them, they'll take the job because they needed a role. Great. I understand bills and things like that. But 6 months down the line, when they're miserable and they think back to that interview and they're like, I freaking knew it. I freaking knew it. You know what I mean? But they ignored it. And I think women have a problem with that much more than maybe men might. I don't know. I'm not a man, but you could tell me better on that. But I think we ignore our guts a little bit sometimes when it comes to that. We overlook things.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say, and on reflection of that, maybe if men have made a bad decision, then they're more stubborn to stick with it. Maybe. I don't know. They don't want to. Some might not want to admit they're wrong. Maybe more, or they wouldn't
I
admit
would
it
concur based on my current husband's personality. But that might be a Punjabi thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's not open that can of worms.
Uh, I
So
just need a
so
sticker that says "I told you so."
you need an "I told you so" jar rather than a swear
Yep.
jar.
There you go. There you go. I'm going to start that, Jack. That's a good idea. I'm going to start that.
Um, and this is yeah. Anyway, anyway.
It's
So
giving me all
so
kinds of ideas because then I can turn that into a financial gift at the end of the year based on how many's in there. So yeah, thanks for that idea. I'm gonna
yeah
implement that. Let you know how it works.
yeah $5 per infraction.
5. That's pretty cheap. I like expensive stuff.
um, I want to talk a little bit more about off the back of alignment and working somewhere that you enjoy, and just talk about a little bit about data. So you mentioned data importer, like you like the tool, and you're like, I wish I had this. And when I was doing data work, what are some of the things that you've seen in the data world that are an issue? Or what are
Hmm.
teams really struggling with when it comes to data management in Salesforce? And I feel like this is a really poignant topic, especially now, because about 5 times a day I see a post on LinkedIn saying AI is going to be worthless to you if you have bad data or what have you. So I don't know if this is going to go that route, but what are you seeing?
So yeah, and on the LinkedIn thing that I've even written that myself about bad data, and now there's kind of a backlash against that even. There are proponents that it doesn't matter if your data is bad, you can just go ahead and start using AI. So I'm firmly against that. But I've spoken about that a lot on LinkedIn. What we're seeing is people just struggling with over complex tools to do kind of a simple job. Not all data migrations are simple. However, the tools might be over complex that they have access to. Um, Kind of like bringing a sledgehammer when all you need is a screwdriver to a job. Um, that's what I'm seeing a lot of. People are kind of, shocked at the simplicity when we show them. And Sam, being a former consultant who did a lot of data work, is very much building in public and building off of what he hears from our customers and trying to make the product easy so that Amy can get on and say, "Oh wow, I could figure this out without even like a video." I did my migration, and that's saving them time. I think that what we're seeing is just a lot of teams that are tasked now with doing a lot more with a lot less. Um, and so they're just having to be super scrappy. And if something can save them a couple of hours here, they can move on to something more, complex, more that requires more of their brain power. Do you know what I mean? So I just see a lot of overwhelmed teams at the moment, and kind of treating the migration as an afterthought. You have a spreadsheet, you've done it before via spreadsheets. Why can't you do it now via spreadsheets? That sort of thing. Just kind of doing more with less.
Yeah. Do is there increased? I feel we live in a world where everything feels urgent these days as well, you know? And I don't know, is there like delivery timescales, or are they getting better, getting worse?
um, I think that in the Salesforce world, and I was a bad consultant because of this. My thing was, wow, we're literally not doing heart surgery, guys. Like if somebody's process builder breaks, it's not the end of the world, but they treated it like that. I think that's a common thread that will always be in consulting. But now, especially on the partner side, from what I'm hearing and having conversations at Dreaming events and things like that, delivery is fast delivery is more important than ever because there is so much competition now for projects. Things are drying up a bit, so they have to be the partner that delivers. And as a result, they're turning to kind of unrealistic timelines. And like I said, doing more with less. They don't have as large of a team because they've gone through layoffs and things of that nature. So it's falling on these 2, 3 consultants that are on this team to try to deliver at the level that maybe they were at a year ago with twice as many people. So it's really wearing, I think, overall on the kind of motivation of a lot of people. There's a lot of burnout going on right now. There's a
You
lot
say
of,
burnout.
yeah, it's a lot of burnout, and nobody wants to get a Slack ping at 11 o'clock at night um, to go fix something, and it's happening. It's always happened, but I have PTSD from that Slack knock. I turn all the sounds off, but yeah, it's just there's a lot of burnout going on right now because people are having to deliver at the same level that they used to with less people, less access to tooling, that sort of thing.
Yeah. You could very easily get super apocalyptic about the whole thing, and just if
Yeah.
this is all happening, then everything could fall apart. I think if you're speaking to, what would your advice to somebody in a more senior leadership position in a business be about expectations in across any project, to make sure that they don't burn their team out, and you know, is do you see a trade-off between a happy and healthy team, productive team, slowing down to speed up almost? I would kind of envisage it as,
Hmm.
if we slow down, if we put the right processes in place, if we slow down just for a quarter, just so that we can build out those systems and become comfortable with those, like delivery mechanisms, or I'm thinking about DevOps specifically. That's one of the things that people say is just like, we don't have time to implement a DevOps process or investigate this because we have so much pressure from the projects and the other things that we currently need to deliver. We're going to carry on bashing our heads against the wall just to get it done, and then we can think about it. But then a new project pops up and they never have time to slow down. But slowing down can help them speed up in the long term. But the pressures of business and the rapidly changing world of work right now means that those deadlines seem more important than ever. Like, what would your
Mhm.
advice to senior leaders be that might be feeling that?
My number one advice is number one is AI is not going to fix everything, so stop it. Um, Deal with your people. Check in. These are the people on the front lines doing the work. Make sure that they're okay. Um, I don't think slowing down to speed up has ever been something that I've seen in the last 10 years. There's just no, particularly in a billable role, um, they're just not having it. They need the money, or they're beholden to shareholders. So I don't think that that's ever something that people are going to be lucky enough to experience, honestly. But I will relate a story from a particularly hairy project that I was on. And this was during 2020. This was one of the projects that led me to change out of consulting. They brought in a new manager, and this manager was from a different country and had a totally different work ethic that did not vibe with the American way of working. Um, so much so that he would expect a reply at 1 a.m. To Slack messages from the team. And we had a business liaison that stood up for us and said, look, you can't keep running this team like this. You can't keep expecting these things. It doesn't work like that here. And she actually had to go over his head to protect her team. So I think my advice to leadership might be is look at that team as yours, and what can you do to protect them from the stuff that's being put on your head by the level above you, and try to navigate that as best you can. If you start losing your team, then what's going to happen? Nobody's going to win. So just kind of realizing that end game.
Yeah. And can you speak to the involvement of, I find it really interesting from like the start of your Salesforce career, you had the Salesforce end user experience, that connectivity to business process, what's useful, the way that you use the system, and then applying that to like consultancy roles. Like, what what can you say about the how integral good relationships between end users or non-technical developers, or not admins or developers or people actually building the systems? What can you tell me about the importance of end users specifically, but maybe slightly non-technical roles like business analysis, and how they contribute to project success? Because I feel like maybe they get overshadowed. overshadowed sometimes.
100%, 100%. And, my very first experience on a project was getting overshadowed. I was brought in because I was an end user, and I was that kind of translator between the business and the consultant to get our business processes into Salesforce. If I wasn't there, what would they have done? You know what I mean? It would have been kind of a hodgepodge of the managers coming in. And that's what I saw at GE and at several projects since then. My number one question when I would start a project was, well, the person that we're designing this solution for, where are they in this meeting? Because it would always be the managers that don't touch Salesforce, but we're developing the solution for who? The people that are going to use it. How did they actually do their job? They were never part of the conversation. So I think me being an end user helped me to ask that question when I was on projects. Like, we need to go see how they're doing their job. We need to understand what they're doing, not just get it from a management perspective where I need this dashboard, these metrics, this is what they want to see. Fantastic. I don't need this person to do 50 clicks to get you what you need. Let me design a better way. So that's how I managed that throughout my career, was always looping in those people. I consider myself non-technical, and I've done just fine.
Yeah, you can be successful without, well, you did build process builders and whatever else, and you never want to touch one again. However,
Yep.
you can be successful in this space without having to do any of that in the first place. Rely on the people and work with the people in your team that do enjoy doing those things, and then you can all have a nice, happy, cohesive team that all does the things they like, and you get better outcomes, right? So
exactly.
Yes. Amy, I've really enjoyed chatting to you, and thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom to your journey and for people to acknowledge like how they're feeling in their roles and recognize signs of things and actually be able to make a positive change. If you had a couple of things that you would encourage the listeners to take away as a summary of your experience, what would those things be?
Be yourself. Excuse me. Be yourself. Listen to yourself. People, what you have to say is valuable. What you have to say can help people. And just show up as you. That's what we want. You.
Sound advice. Amy, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your wisdom. And for folks listening to this podcast, go check out Amy on LinkedIn. Always sharing useful, helpful advice as it relates to data and a bunch of other things. So go look up Amy on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Data Importer, you need to go to where, Amy?
dataimporter.io.
Bosh, there you go. dataimporter.io to learn more about Amy and Sam and what they're doing over there. And of course, whatever platform you're listening on this episode on, please go like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Really helps me out personally, so thank you in advance. Amy, thank you for your time, and listeners, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you, Jay.